You will look at yourself one day and you won't know who you are because you don't remember who you were. You know, sometime along the way, or maybe at 13 or 14, we let go of the little person that kept us going. That little person that was always there, I got you, man, I'm here. That person, when we get about 13 or 14, we get embarrassed of him. And we push him aside and we don't listen to him anymore. And he's always knocking. Hey, hey. And after so long of a time, maybe 10, 15 years, you don't even know him. You show up at your own door and you don't even know who you are. Your family doesn't know who you are. So it's important, no matter what you do, no matter what challenges you go through, you remember who you are.
I'm your biggest fan. I hope it falls into place just how you planned it. Life could put you in a pickle, just make sure it's kosher. Lean on me like Bill Withers until you smell the roses. What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Subscribe or die trying. You see the thumbnail, you see the link. I think it's a good question to ask, you know. Seriously, a good question to ask. When did you forget you? The way Terrence Howard put it, right? It's like, you know, around 13, 12, 13, 14, you stop being you. And I get that. I really do get that in the sense of you hit a certain age and people tell you, yo, you know, you're getting older now. You need to think a certain way. You need to start behaving a certain way. And I'm not talking in a childish way. I'm not talking about going from a child to a teenager to an adult. That's not what I'm talking about. But in a sense, people wanting you to get more sophisticated, right? You know, I want you to be more sophisticated and da-da-da-da. And in that process, to try to be something quote-unquote better than you are, you lose who you are. And for me, you know, I looked at it as I got older as my family wanted me to change certain things about my personality. Because some of them were fearful of where it could go. And like, I don't know what can happen to him. And some of them were like, yo, yeah, I don't want to deal with him as an adult if like this, because he might end bad. Like, I'm going to say this. So my older cousin tells this story of me as a kid. And he says, you know, I was watching television. I watched cartoons, you know, as a kid. And my grandmother had this old TV, one of those full model TVs. So it's the TV that had the first remotes. And the first remotes were just two buttons, two big buttons. You know, a big wooden remote, you know, about this big, two buttons. One for on and off and one to turn the channel from one channel to the next. But it was wooden, but the ends were metal. So it's like a little box. And he says, man, I didn't want to watch cartoons. I walked in and he was watching cartoons. And I clicked it off. I was like, man, I ain't watching that. And I just sat down. And you just was sitting there, didn't say nothing. And we just sitting there watching TV. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I wanted to watch. And he said, you grabbed the remote. And I ain't see you. And then you just, bah! He said, I clocked him right in his head. Bah! He was like, what the f-? I said, what you do next? He said, I turned that back on them cartoons. And I was like, oh, I see how serious this is. And even like being younger in school and your brain works a certain way and you're smart, but the teachers are trying to like dumb you down and you don't like it. And there's a difference between I know there was the time period where write your workout. And he's like, no, I got it in my mind. It's like, in that process of writing your workout makes you feel like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And some people don't write their workout because they're cheating off somebody else. But that's a whole nother story. But it's not that aspect. It's like you shouldn't think this way, because if you keep thinking this way, I see you're going to actually be a problem in the future for these adults. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to, put you in this box over here to make sure you'll never get in the room with these other adults because you might be able to beat them at their own game type of scenario. So people change you, right? And there's this fight of, yo, no, I'm never going to change, da, 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 da. And you start realizing, you change this and then you change that. And some of these things you felt like you needed to change for yourself. You aged a little bit, you grew a little bit. I don't need that. I can leave that where it's at. But I want to grow into this. And you start evolving and growing as a person. And then you might wake up one day and you're 30 and you don't even recognize you. Like where you came from and where you at. It's not you became a different person to get where you're at. And a different person in the sense of you don't know who you are at your core anymore. Some people assimilate and change and they get results that they wanted, but now they are a character the rest of their lives, fighting to find themselves. Some people were nice people and they became mean people because they felt like, I got to be mean to get this, that, and the third, and then they lost their nice way. Some people were, smart and they became dumb. It's like, I remember when what happened? It's like, some people had common sense and then they lost that and became naive. And you're looking back like, what happened? You know, some people were resourceful and then they became comfortable people. So now they don't know what it is. They can't think themselves out of a wet paper bag now. So, but you, like Terrence Howard was talking about, you hear that tapping like, yo, 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 you gonna forget about me? And sometimes you forget about who you are. And I've seen it where I've seen people who remembered themselves for who they were while they were who they were at the time, and realizing they didn't like what they became. Because who you are at your core is who you are at your core. And I've seen people have those blow ups internally and externally where, like, who is this person? And the problem is the person that they were is fighting with the person that they are. And I've had those moments where it's like, yo, can who I am at my core actually maintain who I am now? Maintain the same responsibilities. I'm like, and I came to a realization that, yeah. But the only difference is personally, I'm like, I was more confrontational when I was younger. Not out of, as I got older, from a child to maybe teenage years, I was more confrontational. Well, I take that. I died down being confrontational sometimes as a teenager, and then I got older and I ramped it up, and it died down, ramped it up and died down, and some people's like it's survival, and it's like ah. And I realized something that, and when I mean confrontation, I don't mean just physically confrontation. I mean I'm gonna get to the bottom of whatever's going on when I see it, and trusting the instincts. I'm confrontational because my instincts tell me something, and I'm like, that okay, we're going this way. And sometimes you lose your instincts trying to grow up and be something different, and you realize it wasn't really worth it. So that being said, is it a bigger thing to lose who you are, or it's a bigger thing to find who you are? Because if you find who you are again, it's going to be at odds with who you are now. and who wins that fight. For me, the little kid that was actually won. And it wasn't really that much of a fight. It was like, about time your ass got here, you been bullshit. But that person knows you better than the person you became, because the person you became is a amalgamation of things that you fantasize yourself to be. But is that you at the end of the day? Probably not. But that's my thoughts. You tell me what you think. Like, share, subscribe, or die trying. Catch y'all on the next one. Peace.
You ever been at the top of the universe? I'm gonna take you there.